Okay, so what if there were no MIT? Well, then there also might not be an internet, or email, or Ethernet, or a place for all those digital things you like to store in some cloud. You'd also have to give up holograms, a spreadsheet, 3D printing, GPS, and those cool computer-generated explosions in some of our favorite movies. You'd need to give back X-ray, handheld calculators, disposable safety razors, secure online shopping, HDTV, optogenetics, the solar house, microprocessors, Jack Flory, and, well, there'd be a whole lot less biomedical engineering. Theoretically speaking, we're going to need to forget Theory X, Theory Y, Chaos Theory, Black Shoals, Little's Law, quarks, computational origami, modern meteorology, and linguistics. There'd be way less artificial intelligence, and for that matter, a whole lot less real intelligence as well. You need to do without the queen of carbon science, the father of modern economics, and the leaders of the European Central Bank, banks of Israel, Chile, Cyprus, India, England, and the US Federal Reserve. We will need to eliminate some languages, like Java and C#. Forget about text-speech recognition. Erase your texts and assume your phone is no longer as smart. We may as well go back to the first machine age. You would miss out on the first African-American architect. And there would be so much to unimagine and undesign. Rockefeller Center, the Lincoln Memorial, and that cool glass pyramid at the Louvre. We need to put an X through edX, MITx, and MIT OpenCourseWare, which would help to uneducate over 100 million people and delete that online education revolution. By the way, we're also going to need to give up our national water quality standards and sewage treatment. We'll unlaunch 9 flights to the moon, 6 lunar landings, 3 manned Skylab missions, and the future of space travel. There goes our understanding of nanoscale and our ability to see through brains. We'd have to unmap much of the human genome. We no longer have the first woman to chair the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. As a side note, we need to give up the DC-9, DC-10, F-15, printable robots, biomechatronics, liquid metal batteries, artificial skin, rayon, radar, metallurgy, solid-state transistors, CT scans, and condensed soup. Of course, this is just a partial list. An actual list would be exponentially longer and ever-growing. But fortunately, we don't have to give progress back. MIT is here. Our ideas never stop, and our ability to innovate is infinite.
All right. So welcome back, everyone. I know we still have some people coming in and joining us from the break. We're going to now switch gears. So you heard from AUDE this morning. You heard from Marcus with some very specific examples on how he uses AI with his teams on his research. So we're now going to switch gears, and we're delighted to have Dr. George Westerman with us. His research has really been, and it is playing today, a crucial role in helping leaders understand how to use AI and understand the impact of AI in their ways of working and in their operations. And this is something that, in my opinion, really sets George apart from a lot of faculty working on this topic. He's very focused on the leadership side and how AI is going to impact all of you in your work. George bridges the fields of executive leadership, education, and technology strategy. He's written many books. One of them, I'm sure he'll talk about, is one of my favorite books on digital transformation. The only thing about George, I got to make that joke, George. I'm sorry about that. The only thing about George is that his PhD is from Harvard, and we don't really like that at MIT. But George, we don't hold that against you. George, welcome on stage.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, you know, I love being at MIT. Every time I go to anything like this at an ILP thing, I watch people like AUDE and Marcus talk, and my jaw just drops. I don't know whether you did that, but we can do that? That's the most amazing stuff. And so I just love being here at things like that. And, you know, these are really hard problems they're solving. And I study a different kind of hard problem. So where they're studying materials and graphs, or they're studying cognition and computing, I'm studying managers and organizations. And you know, how you make these algorithms work there is really hard. How you make organizations work is also really hard, but in a different way. And so that's why I think we're all on the panel here to think what goes through. So what do I study? I study innovation processes. I study organizational culture. I study driving transformation. And the whole goal of it is how can we help organizations to thrive in a world where technology is constantly changing, constantly accelerating. So one of the questions that I keep hearing when I'm out there talking to companies is, what do I do about this stuff? And that's a big question, right? You know, okay, we got this cool stuff, but like, where do I invest? How do I get? Generative AI came out, and the question is, well, do I tell people they can use it, or do I tell people they should not use it? And my answer is very simple. Even if you say don't use it, they're going to use it, right? So find a way to, it's like telling your teenagers not to go out and do bad things. They're going to do it. You just hope they don't do too many bad things, right? So that's why I put this talk together. The question is now, if we're going to make decisions about AI as leaders, maybe we need to know enough about AI to be able to make better decisions. Because in 20-something years of studying digital and what it does to companies, most of the stuff we kind of had an idea how it worked, right? And you know, it kind of, you could make sense of e-commerce and digital and mobile. This AI stuff, there's some magic in there. There's some real magic. And to me, that's really disturbing, is like, I don't even understand how those things work, so I don't believe what's coming next. I don't know what the decisions are. The more I've studied this, the more I realized it kind of is magic, but at least there's some pattern to the magic, and so that's what I want to help you with. Now, the other thing that's a little bit intimidating for me is, although I'm an engineer, I haven't done real engineering in years. And so what I want to tell you today is going to aim for making it practical, but not as precise. And so if I can make this 90% accurate and 100% clear, I have accomplished things, okay? Now, the other 10% accurate, hopefully it's directionally correct, but if it's really wildly wrong, they'll tell you, okay? So that's the goal here. So what every leader needs to know about AI. AI is getting a whole lot of attention, right? This is the standard Google Trends graph, and you can see, you know, there's the red line and how big it's getting, and the blue line is this generative AI idea. But here's the other thing. What's really getting a lot of attention is ChatGPT, right? People really are wondering about this stuff. What do we use? And what's different about ChatGPT, about this generative AI? For the first time, we have AI that anybody can do, as opposed to having to deal with the really smart people and they do it for us. And that causes, first of all, it's really exciting, but second of all, it's really scary, right? Because anybody can do it. I think that's why it's getting the attention where we want to go. So, you know, Aude talked a little bit, Aude talked a little bit about what generative AI can do. Just want to give you some applications in business, just to kind of level set here. We now can create professional videos in 15 minutes. And instead of me standing in a room and doing an hour of recording to get 10 minutes, you've all been through this, I'm sure. Now you just give it 200 or 300 words and she will say it for you. And if you don't like the way she looks, there are 100 other people, little avatars out there. And if you don't like the fact she's speaking English, well, she'll speak French for you. Just push a button. She'll speak Vietnamese. Just push a button. So first of all, if you think about all the materials you have from a marketing standpoint, where you have it all in French or all in English, now you can have it in 150 languages. And with the push of a button, it can be talking, not just. So that's one of the things that's possible there. And the other thing that's possible now is HeyGen and other things. I can talk for 3 or 4 minutes on video. Then I can feed words in, and I will speak on video saying things I've never seen before. And you've also, have you heard about this idea of a deep fake? Okay, deep fake, yeah, it's exactly that, right? You have a simulated video where, my favorite right now is when you saw the Pope in that big puffy white coat, right? But it's video too, and that can be used for good and for bad, but for the good part of it, from the idea of just getting this video out there, that's very possible, right? So that's one thing, that's just very, now coding also, these copilots are very helpful in the coding world, and you know, people are picking up, the companies are learning how to do this well, but the programmers are already getting pretty good at this. These coaching, though, these copilots are not just in the coding. This Cresta is built on some technologies developed at MIT and elsewhere, where as a person is talking in a call center, something can be whispering in their ear saying, that person is confused. Slow down and explain the product. That person is getting angry. Try to do this to calm them down. Okay? And then the other thing it can do is it can do the next step. It can look across what we've been doing for the week and say, you know, George, you're great at talking to people, but you don't close the sale very fast. Move to the close faster, right? So these kinds of ideas, this is through text, but it's becoming more and more through audio and other things. You can coach people. And what we find is that everybody gets better in a call center, and the very new people get better much faster. Okay? Through some nice randomized trials to show that thing. And then, of course, also the companies we already work with are already embedding this into their own products that they give you. So if you haven't yet seen what Adobe can do with imagery, to take out that background and put another background in, or, you know, I didn't shoot quite enough video, can you give me another 10 or 20 seconds of video based on what I did? Or, you know, it's a rainy day, so I don't want the sunny picture, I want the rainy picture. It can do that right away, right? It's really fascinating stuff. But they also have your entire marketing chain. So now as you're segmenting for different customers, when you're trying experiments to figure out who's going to buy, they can manage that whole thing, not only by swapping A and B, but by creating C and trying it with you. So this stuff is already out there happening in many, many places. And you know, you can either develop it yourself or you can just wait, and most of your vendors will already do it at Salesforce, those kinds of things. Here's another thing, though, you know, and you wonder, is it being used? Certainly, the economic research is showing it's not having a lot of impact yet. But I think if we wait, we will get there, right? These things tend to take a while. Also, it takes a while for the economic numbers to catch up, right? But here's an example of one thing. Lemonade does insurance. It's a direct model. It's a pretty simple insurance they do. So not the really complicated stuff. It's renter's insurance and things like that. But AI is already writing 98% of our policies, taking our first claim notices 98%, handling 50% of our claims instantly. Now, that's not generative AI. That's combinations of AI. But what's interesting is anything that's routine is being replaced by AI quickly, which means if all you do is routine work, find a new job, right? But the other way to think about it is if your job has a lot of routine work in it, these things can give you superpowers. It's different combinations of the technologies that you are doing. And as an individual, we want to think about that. But as organizations, we want to think about how to do that too. And it doesn't just have to be kind of a text thing. This is Cisco. This is one of the world's largest fleets of trucks. They do supply for restaurants and food service and things like that. And they're using AI all over the place. In the supply chain for delivery or substitution. Hey, there's a restaurant that needs to use this kind of mushroom, and we don't have that kind of mushroom. We'll try this instead. Oh, we are out of shallots, try this. I have no idea what those answers are, but they know the answers, and they can keep you supplied, routing, that kind of thing. And then you see on the customer side, too, we can suggest things based on what you have. We can optimize our call centers. If I'm going to do a sales call for a big customer, I can create the script to help you in that sales call, right? So these are all kinds of opportunities. All of this has AI in it. The little brains are where they're adding generative AI. They're not replacing the process with AI, but they're adding generative AI to make it happen. So hopefully what I've done in the last 3 or 4 minutes has shown you where this is useful in industry. What I want to do with the next 10 or 15 minutes is give you an idea on what the heck is this AI stuff. Now, if you know this stuff, just close your ears or just kind of say, okay, yeah, George has a different way of thinking about it. If you don't know, hopefully I'm going to help you be a little less, it'll seem a little less obscure, it'll seem a little less magic to you, okay? So I categorize 4 categories of AI. My co-authors and I, 4 categories of AI. Rule-based systems, which I've had for a long time. I categorize statistics and econometrics as AI. Then there's neural networks and deep learning, which used to be the coolest thing ever, except now that's called traditional AI. Once you got traditional, you know nobody cares about it anymore, right? And the last is the generative AI side. Now, I will tell you, if you talk to 3 AI scientists and ask them to give you categories of AI, those 3 scientists will give you 10 different categories. I don't think we have an agreement on what they are. So this is my set. I'm sticking with it, okay? But let's walk through each of these. Before I do that, though, I want to really emphasize one important point, and I mentioned it for a few minutes ago, but I want to mention it again. It's not that these are all generative AI answers. It's not that these are all deep learning answers. These are problems to be solved, some tasks of which can be solved by AI, and some tasks of which cannot. And so, for example, at Airbus here, strictly speaking, we don't invest in AI or natural language or image. We always invest in a business problem. So when they're trying to solve problems in their manufacturing or improve their manufacturing, they're using AI in many different ways, not only to detect the problems, but also to get the answers out across the lines. It's a problem they're solving. And on the other side, on the consumer side, Home Depot is, I think it's the world's largest home maintenance repair place. It's a place that just brings me joy whenever I go there, right? And they should always be looking for extraordinary experiences, bringing joy to the user, experience that delights. That's what they want to do, right? So if I have to find this screw, right? Tell me where in this store I can find that screw. They're getting in these stores now, oh, yeah, I know where that is. Go to aisle 19, bay number 4, right? Or, hey, I got a problem to solve, or I've got these, what goes with that, right? They can do that kind of problem for you. But what technology we use underneath, that's secondary, right? Always start with the problem. So here are the 4 types. Let's go through each of these. Number 1, rule-based systems. When I first started as an engineer in a long, long time ago, my first job was to help create a rule-based engine for my company. And the idea was we have a lot of experts out there, and we say, hey, you know, how do you handle this problem? And you say, well, I do this and this. Well, what about this? I do this. And we'd come up with a set of rules, basically if-then statements, right? And I'd ask you, and I'd ask you, and we put those all together, but the problem is then we have conflicts, and we have edge conditions, and we have all kinds of things. And so I was helping to rationalize, I was developing an engine that helped to rationalize that kind of stuff and make sense out of it, which is archaic, ancient technology now, but it was a hard problem back then. But we still have these rule-based systems. You have rules engines in your company doing all kinds of things. Credit processing, HR decisions, many different things you have these rule-based systems. They are not bad. They're just ancient, right? You don't program with data, you program with experts. And that's a hard, expensive process. But once it's there, they're very explainable. Here's why I made this decision. We used these rules, but they can also be very rigid because how do we change the rules? What rules do we change? What conflicts are we managing? And they can only handle what they're programmed to do. They can't get beyond that. So this is one thing out there. You have them. Don't get rid of them. They're very useful. Okay? Then we get on to the next thing, econometrics. Those of you, anybody have their statistics class in school? You learned how to do a regression? Anybody? A few of you. It's still useful. And the computers are much more powerful now than they ever were before. But what are they doing? They're basically either classifying, tell us how to write the right equation so I can tell whether this is a blue thing or a green thing, right? They're classifying, here, what's the equation, what are the weights on that equation? Or they're finding trends, the regressions, right? Tell me where the pattern is, the line pattern is there. Create an equation of multiple variables and weights on those variables that helps then saying, given a situation where I am, what's the trend going across? Now, what are those weights? It figures them out from the data. Okay? This is tremendously useful. We can do it in 2 dimensions. You get to 3 dimensions or you get to 50 dimensions. We can't do it anymore, but the computers, they can do it no problem. We have techniques now to think about causality and other things in this space, and you don't need to think about lines. As long as you can put a functional form on it, you can predict that also. This is AI. This is computers doing things that are, we used to think only people could do, and it's still tremendously useful. Now, what's nice about this is it is not nearly as expensive as the AI models we've been talking about, and it tends to be kind of explainable, right? So if you get an answer, you could say, well, that's because this variable is worth this much, and this variable is worth that much, and this variable is negative. It is explainable, and you get the same answers every time that you run this process. So it's AI, it's tremendously useful, and we should keep using it for those kinds of things. I want to come back, though, to what I just said. You're creating an equation, and you're putting weights on the variables to be able to tell green things from blue things. Or you're putting weights on the variables to be able to figure out where that line, given a prediction, what would the other outcome variable be. That's what we're doing in econometrics, but that's what we're also doing in a lot of other AI too, right? So that's where we're going next. If you had to figure out, okay, I've got 10 characteristics of a person, tell me which ones are our best employees, which ones are the worst employees. What would you do? You would say, well, you know, they're smart, that gets a certain amount of weight. They get their work done, that's get a certain amount of weight. They're good with people, that gets a certain amount of weight. And you would figure out, well, this is worth 25%, this is worth 10%. And then you'd use it to rank your people, and you'd say, no, that's not quite right. Let's change that weight, right? And then the ranking comes out, and you say, that looks about right. And then you use that ranking algorithm for all your other people, right? We've all done this in different ways. That's all that's happening. That's all the regression's doing, but it's all that the rest is doing too. Now, here's where I'm going to get in trouble with the AI people. This is deep learning. This is this gets complicated, and this is kind of magic. So this picture that OLIVIA kept showing you, right? This picture here, they use this to scare us, right? They use this to say, look, there's all this kind of stuff. And the thing is, what's happening here, right? Well, here are the data coming in. Here's the outputs we're trying to predict. And this is a set of staged weighted averages, just like I was talking about, you know, one stage, but in multiple stages. And when you do multiple stages, that's when the magic happens, because then it can start to figure out things that we never dreamed it could figure out. So the multiple stages. The other question you have, though, is, well, how do I ever choose the weights in there? And the answer is, you don't. The computer chooses it by going over and repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating, okay? So let me just give you an example here. Numbers. We all know those are numbers, right? But imagine writing the algorithm to decide what is a 2. Well, it has a curve at the top, has a little loop down here, it has a tail that goes off at the end, right? Except for the fact that, you know, some of those don't have loops. Some have extra loops. Sometimes the tail goes down like this. Sometimes it's almost impossible to write an algorithm with rules to say that. But for 30 lines of code, you can do this easily using a different kind of model. And so we know the difference, but writing the words is hard. So what do? Okay, so here's a number 9, right? Two-dimensional thing. We separate out into a straight line, 784 pixels. Now, what's crazy about that is we know now that this pixel fits next to this one, and it's right above that and below that, right? And as you straighten it out, you lose all of that. That spatial knowledge disappears. But you think that's kind of important, right? So you stick it in here, you run it through the weights, right? So all of these things get weighted average to create that next row, that next column, that next column. And in the end, you've got 10 predictions on what kind of digit it is. And you go through, you try it once, and you say, well, it looks a lot like a 1. Doesn't look much like a 2, but it looks a lot like a 7, right? Imagine these to be kind of a percentage accuracy to this, okay? And you say, you are so wrong, you're not right on any of that. So what do? You backchain it, and you say, let's turn that knob. Let's turn that knob. Let's turn that knob, okay? And you try it again. Give me another number, and you try it again. And you do it 5, 10 times, nothing happens. You do it 5, 10,000 times, 500,000 times, boom, it works. It truly is magic. It's the magic of large numbers, okay? And so that's really what's happening here at a very simple level. Remember, I'm going for 90% correct, 100% clear. The 10% correct, that's why you hire that's why we have the people that really do this as opposed to explain it, okay? So you need a lot of data. And you need a lot of labeled data. That really is a 9, it's not a 3, okay? So let's go back on this thing again. What does that mean here? Many iterations, but you need that labeled data, which is truth. So every time you log in and it says, prove that you are human, find the stop signs in that picture, you are labeling data for somebody. Every time Facebook says, give me the new and the old you challenge, they call it a challenge. What they're saying is actually give us data that we can do to create an aging algorithm. okay? The data has to be right. The data has to be the kinds of people we're talking about, not just certain kinds of people. And then onward now, then generative AI. And Aude explained the generative AI and how that comes about. But what it's doing is it's using these same kinds of algorithms plus some more to randomly figure out what's the next thing to say after what you know. And it'll take sets of words and it'll say this word fits best. Then it'll generate more sets of words and it'll say this fits best with what I know, what you asked, and what I just created. Then it says this set of word, now this one fits best with the two things I just did plus what you asked plus what I know. Aude said this beautifully. This idea of hallucinations and how does it get it wrong? I've never heard this said before, but I love it. It's 100% hallucinations. This is all made up. But sometimes the made up stuff looks like reality, and sometimes it doesn't. So that's one of the challenges we have to manage in there. So it's creating novel artifacts. It can be used for evil as well as good. We have an election cycle in the United States, and I am waiting for deep fake videos to come out of one candidate or another that are just going to be really, really scary. It hasn't happened yet, but certainly it's happening in some of the marketing. We do have the hallucinations. My favorite hallucination problem is this one. A lawyer said, hey, ChatGPT, I write a lot of stuff. ChatGPT, can you write my court documents for me? The problem is the judge was not happy because the judge said, sir, you cited case law to support your points, and those cases do not exist. So not only is he in trouble with the judge, now the whole world is laughing at him, right, for having done this. So don't do that, right? You want to make sure this does right. You want to think about where can this be useful? Maybe customer interactions, certainly marketing kind of stuff, that kind of thing. But it may not be good for medical diagnosis yet, right? Huge training data, huge processing power. Marcus talked about needing an entire nuclear power plant to power your engines, and we're seeing that, right? And there are also these IP issues. New York Times just sued one of the big companies saying, don't use our articles that way. That's stealing our stuff, right? So we got to get there. But, it can be tremendous useful. So this is a company that does a lot of writing and a lot of creativity. This is an advertising company, Dentsu Creative, one of the largest. And they said, we're using this now. What he said is, we thought people would be scared about this, but we spent time training. We spent time getting people to share their innovations. A lot of people can't see themselves going back to how they used to work before. These tools are tremendously useful in helping them do their advertising and their imaging and that kind of stuff, but also in project management, in budgeting, in proposal development. Okay? It frees up the time that creatives need to be creative. It doesn't have to replace you. It can augment you, and we have some articles on that, how can it augment knowledge work. Okay? Now, each of these tools has its goods and its bads. And just as if you had a toolbox, right, you're not going to use a hammer when you need to drive in a screw, right? You're going to use the right tool for the right thing. We want to think about that same thing. You start with the problem that you want to solve, but then you want to try to figure out, okay, now, which tool's the right one for that problem? And so here's some questions you can ask. What's the cost of being wrong? If I can't be wrong, don't use generative AI, because it by its nature is wrong, although it's often very right. Okay? Now you can back it up with some reinforcement and some other things to get closer to being right. Does it have to be explainable? Well, the deep learning models, you cannot really explain what's going on in the middle. Now, they've talked about, we are doing a lot of work to try to make that more explainable, but it's really hard, okay? Does it have to be repeatable? In a lot of regulatory environments, you have to give the same answer to every time, but sometimes you don't. So if I am selecting candidates to hire, I may not care whether I choose you or you or you if you're all equal. Just if you're all equal, that I chose one of you. Okay? Now, on the other hand, so you may or may not need to be repeatable in there as long as you still are accurate and unbiased, right? And in confidentiality, there's a question about some of these models, especially the cloud-based models. How confidential are you? This is now a solvable problem. Okay? So one way to think about this is, as you're talking to your people and their problems being solved, these are questions you as leaders can ask. How are we thinking about these problems? What are we doing there, right? Your job is not to answer them, it's to ask them and then to assess the answers we've got so that your people developing the models can get some direction and also you can govern well. Some other questions to think about are the data. Do you have a source of truth? Because without labeled data, this stuff's really hard. And even more importantly, is it generalizable data? So Amazon, 10 years ago or so, released, they said, listen, we made a mistake. We decided that we're going to take all the resumes of people applying for engineering jobs. We built a deep learning model to figure out which resumes look the most like our engineers, our best engineers. And it turned out they were routinely rejecting women. So if you were the captain of the women's swimming team, you would never get a job at Amazon, right? Why is that? Because none of their engineers were women. Very few of their engineers were women, and very few of them were athletes, right? So you would never get that job. Now, it turns out also, in addition to the pure just, if you said women in there, women and men use different words for the same thing. Women tend to use more collaborative words. Men tend to use other kinds of words, and it was rejecting based on that. Amazon, for their credit, said, you know what? We found out this problem. We want to tell people about it because this is a bias, and we have fixed this problem now. They did not mean to create a bias, but there was a bias. And this is really important when you do your models. Once the model's there, go back and check it with the diverse data that you use to make sure it really does not have a bias in it, or it's not showing a bias. Because even with the best intentions, you can end up in that situation. Okay? So those are questions you can ask. And a stoplight picture that you can try as you think through this. The whole goal here is, once again, it's not to tell you what thing to do, but help you ask questions, ask the right questions, so you can make better decisions with your technical people who actually really have the knowledge here. Okay? I want to turn over with the last couple minutes, though, and think about a different set of questions. If this is about a task and a fit with a kind of method, and hopefully over the last half hour or so, I've given you some ideas how to know a little bit deeper about these, how to be a little less mystified, a little less scared about these things. There's some big scary problems as managers you need to think about. Where do we invest? How do we govern? What do we do about our people? And these are really important problems. How many of you have heard of Moore's Law? Okay, good. If you're at an MIT event, you have to hear about Moore's Law, right? That technology is growing at an exponential rate. There are arguments about whether Moore's Law is going to die. I can tell you, after looking at about 40 years of research, there have been 4 or 5 times we've said Moore's Law is dying, and Moore's Law keeps going. So if you're going to take a bet, there's that same argument going on, but if you're going to bet, I would bet on Moore's Law still for a little while, okay? Now, I have my own version. Oh, so by the way, so these are all just the examples I've given you. Here, where else can you use it? But this is Westerman's law. This is my version of Moore's Law. Technology changes quickly and organizations change much more slowly. Okay? And I know this to be true. Studying, a couple decades of studying this, I know it to be true when I was a manager and making things work. Computers tend to do what you tell them to. People are a completely different story. Right? People will do what you persuade them to do, right? And that's a different kind of angle on things. And so what does that mean? In this digital tech transformation world, technology is not really the problem. Technology is a really hard problem. But transformation is also a really hard problem, okay? And that means it's not just a technology problem, it's also a leadership challenge. So with the last few minutes, I just want to talk about how do we think about it from organizations. Number one, artificial intelligence is a learning process, but the organization has to do learning, not just the models. So this is Artie at H&M, the fast fashion retailer, right? It's like putting a tire on a car. You don't put it down, you don't screw it down there because you're going to bend the rim. You put it here and then there and there and there and there. By the way, I learned about 6 months ago that I'm a very bad father because my son called me. He's 25 years old. He says, "Dad, I have a flat tire. What do I do?" I said, "Just change the tire." He said, "How do you do that?" So that was a failure of me as a dad, so I got to walk him through that process. But this is really important, right? That you're not going to be able to just say, "Here's my 5-year plan, let's just do it." You say, "Here's our plan, let's get started, and let's build up some capability in different places." Here are the questions that you need to think about as leaders. How do we prioritize? How do we manage the risks? What do we think about capabilities? So here's some more questions for you. What's your policy? Because people will try to follow the policy if they know it. Most will. Now, there will people that try to break policy, but most of the time, if you give policy, people will do that, right? What is your policy? Do you have a generative AI policy yet? Or is your generative AI policy whatever you're doing, don't tell me about it, right? Are you being top-down on how you decide? Top-down is very efficient, lower risk, but you lose the innovation at the edges. Do you do bottom-up? The edges are innovating, but you have a lot of repetition, you have a lot of loss, and you also can introduce risk you don't know about. How do you link it? Is it your IT people driving it, or is it business people driving it, right? So these are questions you need to have answers to. Now, the answer will vary from company to company. I'm happy to talk to you about how other research we're doing on how to do this well. But the wrong answer is we don't have an answer, okay? Then the other answers are more or less right, and we can talk about that. Some other questions: how do we find and share and build on our innovations? Like I said, one of the things that always amazes me at MIT is how much I don't know about what MIT is doing. I'm seeing what these people, I love it. I wish I knew about it before. In your organization, it's the same way. Who's doing something interesting that you don't know about? And what can you do with innovation contests? What can you do with governance processes and other things to identify what's happening? Because then it's not, hey, I want to do this, let me start fresh. You say, oh, you want to do that? Well, she just did that. Why don't you build on what she did, and it'll make your job easier? And plus, we only have one of them now instead of two that we need to maintain. Okay? One of the ways that I've seen, so certainly there's, Société Générale has its own way of thinking about governing, and what they did is a top-down request for what might we do with generative AI. They then, bless you, they then figured out about 100 unique examples of what they're asking for. They went out and they tried to build a few right away because they needed them, but now IT is building the foundations. What does it mean to be an expert, to have a virtual expert? What does it mean to do client assistance? Once they do that right, they'll build on those. Now, SocGen is a financial company, highly regulated. They also have the advice they need to get right, and also European privacy laws and other things. It's a really hard problem. So being more central is what they want to do, and they figure the bigger problems need a lot of planning before you can get there. May or may not be right for your business, okay? Cisco, we're not a technology company, we're a truck company, we're an inventory company. So what they do is they say, where does this fit? Well, can we solve it with simple things we already know how to do, like bots? Let's do it. Do our current tool providers either have it or plan to do it? Okay. Only then will we build it if neither of those is the answer. Okay? And plus, we got to know that it's a good result. So that leads to a couple more questions then on those top things. Culture. What do you do when the machine is smarter than you? What do you do when the machine tells you that you are wrong? How does that feel, right? And there's a certain amount of humility we need to understand it might be right, and rather than rejecting it, to start saying, why might that be right? How can I learn from that? There's also just the ethics side of this. You can do a lot of really bad things, so what are we doing in our culture to get there? But the other thing that's really important here, even more than ever before, this idea of experimentation and learning, okay? What's that? Aha, okay, the idea of experimentation and learning, we got to do it. And the last point I want to make is this one. This stuff's scary to a lot of people. Will I have a job? Will my job be the same? Will I be able to do the job, or is some 20-year-old going to come and replace me because they can use these tools better? So if organizations are built with people, what are we doing to help our people develop? And so we're doing a lot of research in this world too. How do you do talent development for people? How do you transform the HR process, not just transform the technology processes that are out there? So let me end then. Whatever you need to know, AI can act very intelligent, but you need to be intelligent in how you use it. I will say this used to say AI is not intelligent, and I got in an argument with an engineer saying, it is intelligent, what are you doing? So now I said, now OLIVIA just came out and said artificial idiots, so maybe I'll put that back on the slide again, right? Choose the right tool for the right problem, not the reverse. You're going to have combinations that solve these problems. But now get started. Do that thing with the hubcap, or with putting the wheel on your tire. Get started and learn, and then you'll make better decisions as you go on. And last but not least, don't forget your people in the process. So I went 5 minutes over, but hopefully there's a few times, there's still room for questions? Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, George. All right, I'll maybe kick off the question cycle with one question for you. Hype or revolution?
Have you heard about the Gartner hype cycle? It's both. I believe it's a revolution, but we have a lot of hype going on right now. And so what does that mean? When you're in a hype world, you hear these really amazing things that are happening, but two things. Either it's something that's happening in a lab that has not yet happened in a company, and we're saying why. Well, that translation is hard, but we'll get there, right? Or it's the same companies, the same examples you hear over and over again. When we get out of the hype cycle, you start hearing more companies doing the stuff. And we're not in that stage yet, but we will get there. And it will, my doctoral dissertation was studying e-commerce and how can you manage bricks and clicks. Remember when we used to worry about that, right? And when the small companies were going to kill the big companies? And then we learned we're beyond the hype, and now we do e-commerce in everything. And I believe that we will get there. AI will be part of everything. It's just not quite the way we imagine it right now.
So George, I know you work with a lot of CEOs from different companies, big companies. What top 3 decisions regarding AI should CEOs take?
Number one is how do we govern this stuff? Investing, prioritizing, comparing across. Big problem that most companies are thinking about. I'm doing some research in there. That's the number one thing. Number 2 is what are we going to do about bias? Right? How do we make sure that we are managing these, we're creating good models, not just models that appear to be good. That's 1 and 2. And the last one I would say is the skills and the development thing. How are you going to help your people be ready for this and be ready to embrace and grow with this as opposed to just waiting and seeing what happens to them?
Is there a particular tool you would recommend for people to try out right away? AI tool?
How many people have tried ChatGPT? Okay, if you have not raised your hand, go home tonight and play with ChatGPT. Okay, don't give it anything confidential, but play with it. You have to do that in order to get a feeling for what these things do. Then move on to Dolly and Midjourney and do on to Sora and other things. These are not hard to do. They can be a little frustrating sometimes, but play with it, and it'll give you an idea what it's good at and what it's not. Okay, so that's it. Use these consumer tools, try them, and then it'll help you understand, but it'll also raise some questions for you.
I'll take the second question here. It's very interesting. You've worked with a lot of senior leaders. What's your success rate at convincing them to change?
Convincing is a really interesting word, right? And we all know how hard it is to convince. Usually I'm brought in often because somebody needs to get the CEO or the chair to change what they're thinking, right? Or the chair has said do this, and now we've got to figure out what we're going to do. That's kind of where I'm working. How do you convince people? You show them that they're better off with this than without this. You show them that the thing that you want to do is not quite as scary and as hard as you think it is because we have processes and steps in place to make it happen. So the magic formula is make them feel that it's better for them or make them feel they have less risk than they think in doing this.
A question on the impact of AI on mental health and environment.
One of the first AI tools out there, I think it came out of MIT, it was called ELIZA. And all it did was take what you said and turn it into a question and send it back. I'm feeling kind of sad today. Why do you think you're feeling sad today, right? And it was just kind of a language thing back in, I think it was the 60s. But they found out also that people were talking to this all the time, right? Now there's a question about do you have an AI girlfriend, right, in ChatGPT or others. I think there are tremendous opportunities for mental health there. On the other hand, I think there are tremendous opportunities to get you running down a rabbit hole and get you in big trouble. So what I'm looking for is the mental health. Can we make a therapist? My favorite example right now, though, and this is a couple years old, new moms. It's 3 in the morning. Your baby is screaming. It won't eat. This baby's two days old, a day old. What do I do? How do I get this child to eat? The British National Health Service created a chatbot where it's hard to find a nurse who will talk to you at 3 in the morning, but the chatbot can actually talk you down a little bit and help you think about it, just to help calm you down and help you maybe get some ideas on what might work. What a great application there, right? That it's helping with just a little bit of mental health for, every mom has real challenges. Can we help you with this little one as you think through your other things? So these things are possible. what I'd love to see is, can we get more into the therapy, that kind of thing, the talk therapy, the cognitive behavioral therapy? There may be possibilities there. There are also dangers we want to be careful. And I'm looking at Aude because she's a cognitive scientist. She'll tell you whether there's any possibility there or not. She's saying, no, it's never going to work. Listen to her.
All right, thank you very much, George.
Okay, great.
And I know there were still a lot of questions on the we were not able to address. So I encourage you to connect with George. We'll give you his contact, email address, and all this, but also connect with him right after this this session this morning. So now we're coming up to one of my favorite parts of this symposium because of the way it's facilitated. It's always very provocative. It's always very intense, and it's the roundtable we're going to have. And I'm extremely excited to welcome on stage Vincent.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Wow, welcome to our roundtable. AI, well, please do take your seats. AI is like fireworks right now. Its potential to revolutionize our industries is mind-blowing. But like we did with George, let's deep dive into how it can actually change our business potential. I'm Vince, and I'm thrilled to have three amazing panelists here to help us crack this very tough nut. Good morning, Aude, again.
Good morning.
Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning.
And good morning, Stéphane.
Bonjour.
So we want this panel to be very interactive, so please do use the Pigeonhole. You can have the codes here. We will try to feed in your questions along the way. So, Stéphane, I'm turning to you for the first perspective. You are Equans Executive Vice President, Central Europe Data Centers and Stoller Storage. You've been working for 30 years within the Bouygues Group and for 20 years in energies and services in both operational and international CFO positions. So, from your very savvy perspective at Equans, to which specific fields do you believe AI will bring the most game-changing impact? And can you provide examples? And is this happening for real, or is it still hype?
Well, we are at the start of the journey. We need to be very humble about that. We are in an industry which has its own specificities and challenges. We are low capex, highly decentralized, and covering a large scope of services, so it has its challenges. Having said that, we have started the journey. So to answer your question, there's one part of the topic which is how do we optimize our cost structure, so productivity, quality. For now, I would say our use cases or proof of concept focus on three things. First of all, it's individual productivity. George mentioned it, and I encourage you to do so. You know, one very practical example is translation. We are working in a lots of different languages. So as I'm concerned, I have people talking in some 10 different languages in my teams. And so when you want to address, for instance, health and safety communication to all staff, how do you do it? And indeed, generative AI is really changing stuff, because in a few minutes you can send out a message that can be understood by a Czech guy, by a Hungarian guy, by a Romanian guy, and it's you speaking. So that's a very practical topic. Then moving on, I think the second topic where we do see quite a lot of potential is document management. We are in a business on large projects where we have extensive and highly complex contractual documentation and correspondence. So having tools who help you manage those documents is quite useful. The same goes with environments in which we have quite a lot of dense and complicated technical documentation, normative documentation like fire protection, for instance. And the third topic is and probably the most promising is data management. So the first thing that we've done is we've rolled out Palantir to try to get to the point where we can do real-time project and profit center management. Then the other topics are lots of things in field service management, for instance, optimizing routes for our mobile technical staff. And then again, everything relating to hypervision solution for facility management, alarm management, predictive maintenance. So that's the flip side of cost structure. And then for now, I guess maybe our major point of attention is how can we grow the top line of the business with profitably with high added value services. And there are two things, I guess. The first is we try to implement AI in our services in order to have enhanced services which are more added value. And this is primarily with clustering and computer vision solutions. So that's typically quality control on automotive assembly lines. Another example is all the application relating to security for defense or for cities. And then at the end of the day, flipping back to physical world, we are a company which does or builds the physical infrastructure which enables AI. So we do electrical power production, we do fiber optic networks, and we do data centers, and without those physical things, there's no AI at all. So
okay. So for the industry, slowly to come. Okay. Thank you very much, Stéphane, for this first insight. I'm now turning to you, Sarah. Thanks for being with us. You are the CEO and co-founder of Osium.ai, where you blend your expertise in materials science and AI. Does this sound familiar? I think that Marcus is doing a bit the same as what you are doing. You have gained this expertise from your time as a tech leader at Google X and from your research at École Centrale in Paris and Stanford University in the US. So, very simple question. Can you explain first how your company works and how it can concretely help Bouygues or other companies present in this room to accelerate their R&D processes and the way they produce and use materials on the field?
Yeah, so first, I think it's worth describing what our product actually does for those industry players. So what we developed with Osium is an AI-powered platform which enables R&D engineers and chemists with no data science prerequisites to develop new materials much faster. So we really help industry players with every step of their R&D processes, from formulating new materials, testing them, characterizing them, but also optimizing their processes in R&D in general. So to give you a concrete example, we work with industry leaders in the field of composites, for example, and they use our platform to develop new composites which are lighter while maintaining or even enhancing other properties such as the mechanical properties. I think to really understand the impact of our solutions, it's worth describing how materials R&D works today. So usually, and that's the case when we always talk with our customers, they explain to us that materials R&D still relies heavily on trial and error approaches. So usually, chemists in the lab will define a set of specifications they want to fulfill to develop a material, and then they will leverage the chemical intuition and their past experience to figure out iteratively the optimal formulations and processing conditions for the materials to fulfill the set of specifications. With our platform, chemists are able to enter all the set of requirements and get the optimal recommendations of materials to synthesize in a matter of minutes, instead of having to go through all the physical testing in the lab that can take days, sometimes weeks, or sometimes months for some specific fields. And if we take a close look at how impactful this can be for industries, we need to think about all the end applications which are actually leveraging new materials. We work with industry leaders in the field of construction, actually work with some of the Bouygues subsidiaries. We work also in the field of textile, aerospace, aeronautics, packaging. There are a lot of challenges related to new materials when it comes to sustainability, developing bio-based materials and new materials which are more compliant with sustainability requirements, but also performance requirements which are really challenging to fulfill when it comes to just like leveraging pure intuition. So we really position ourselves at the intersection of AI and material science, which is a field that is pretty new. I think during the past years, we've seen a lot of work done in the field of AI for other fields in science, such as healthcare or drug discovery. But when we started the company, there was much less done in the field of material science. And therefore, we figured out that there was a real need to bring this new solution to the industry to help optimize R&D workflows and help easily integrate artificial intelligence in those industries.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring, Sarah, and already a lot of feedback questions that I will take in a few minutes from the audience. AUDE, thank you very much again for your great keynote. You know, like George, I will remember the artificial idiot. You know, I felt like a natural idiot. Now I'm less lonely. So thank you very much for that. So given your extensive research in AI and MIT collaborative approach to corporates, can you provide specific examples of how AI has been successfully integrated into large organizations to improve their bottom line, like Stéphane was mentioning? And how can Bouygues and other corporates in this room leverage similar AI technologies to enhance their own performance?
Yes, so for the College of Computing, I'm very lucky to have the chance to meet with many industry and corporate and talk with them about, okay, well, how can AI be implemented in one of their vertical? And in my role as the MIT director of MIT IBM, What's an AI Lab, then I really see innovation and ideas going on. So let me give you a couple of examples. So one is for one of the business of IBM is their relatively new Watson X platform, which is a platform of large language model, foundation model, that can be applied to different businesses in for healthcare or for management and so on and so on. And what we discover is, so AI is going very fast. The MIT faculty have new ideas. They test on their new algorithm on a few GPU. They publish this. But because the lab is MIT plus IBM, then IBM has the ability to jump on those new ideas right away before they are even published, before the code is available. That's part of the lab and the collaboration. So then we see that those new algorithms make their way into the Watson X platform, like in a few months, literally, or a few weeks, depending. And when you think about an AI architecture for a platform, there are many steps. You want more curated data with less bias. You also want to accelerate the time it takes for the model to respond. You also want, like if somebody asks a question, behind the hood, the model can change the prompt to respond something more, what actually the user is really asking and wanting to know. So there are many steps like that. So we do see this improvement at a very fast time scale.
Thank you very much. So coming to questions from the audience, there was one for you, Stéphane, that I noticed on the thread. You mentioned Palantir and other vendors of solutions. So how comfortable are you with working with people who have access to very important and sometimes sensitive data for your company?
Yeah, it's a real question. I think the question was how our reduce our servitude to those tech companies. Yeah.
Yes. That was the way it was put.
Yeah. It's. I would say we need to be not so naive. So we need to be quite cautious about the contracts we sign with those companies as much as we can.
So not do like the lawyer.
Not do like that. No,
okay.
It's a question of IP. I think what is proprietary, what is not. It's also a question of internal policy. We need to educate our people when it comes to what they should avoid doing. So using, for instance, it's great that people use ChatGPT to test and learn. It's not great that they use ChatGPT with data from the company that...
The last price on your last tender.
For instance. So they need to know, and there needs to be rules, limited rules, a set of rules. That's what we've tried to do. Then be cautious about contracts. And then at the end of the day, the servitude will only come if these products find their market, because we buy them at the end of the day. We pay the licenses. So I remember General Electric some years ago invested billions in trying to develop the IT platform, the web platform for the industry. They failed because nobody wanted to buy this, not to have all their eggs in the same basket. So let's not be naive. Let's be cautious about the contracts we sign, and let's try to give some clear guidance to our people. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Sarah, a question for you now. You've been, living in two worlds, very different worlds, the French world and the American world, and you started your company. How do you bridge the experience? What is different between both of those worlds in corporate terms and in personal terms?
So I will say that the situation in this comparison has changed a lot in a few years. I think when I was studying in École Centrale, for example, AI was already a topic, but it was not as important as today in France, and we see that the French ecosystem is more and more active in the AI space in general. So actually, for a few years, I saw when I was in Silicon Valley, that is also a really special place because you're really at the center of all these tech discussions, that there was a difference and a gap between how AI was adopted in California versus how AI was seen in France. But I'm seeing less differences now that AI is bringing more and more value into the French ecosystem. And actually, the fact that everyone can use AI in their daily lives through ChatGPT, for example, and other tools, also enables to decrease this gap. So still, there are some differences, especially because even if we see that players in Europe and in the US are open to integrating such AI solutions into their workflows, we usually see that we need to spend some time for both players, but a bit more in Europe to explain what the value of AI is and how this can be integrated into the workflow, how to make sure that ROI can be assessed, and at the same time that, for example, data privacy can be maintained. Those are questions which are tackled in both, when we work with both US players and French players, but we need to spend more time into explaining all these different kind of concepts when it comes to France.
Precisely piggybacking on this latter part of your answer, regarding the performance of materials, there's a question from the audience saying, how can you trust? I mean, what you're doing is you're dealing with the bread and butter of the company you're working for, so how can they trust that what you come up with is going to predict successfully the performance of the material structure, the macro one?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question. And I think the specificity of our field is that it's not only about data and artificial intelligence, but it's also about understanding the physics behind those models. So we spend a lot of time, we actually built a proprietary technology that is suited to the field of material science that leverages both insights from the physical world and insights from the data-driven world. And first, this is how we can really model efficiently the performance of materials and the behaviors in different kind of contexts. But it's also how we can evaluate what is generated by the algorithms, because once you have some results and you can really compare that with chemistry, chemical intuition, or physical intuition, then you get a sense of how great are the results. And of course, we always spend some time with physical testing, actual real testing in the labs with industry players so that they can also validate the results.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Back to you, Aude, maybe with this question based on your experience, how do companies focus today their efforts regarding AI on innovation or improving productivity? And what are they doing right now? And what should they do in your view regarding AI? So should they focus AI on being very innovative or rather being bottom line centered?
Yeah, so of course we see both. But here is a recipe that if the company is able to put effort in those three domains. So, for instance, with MIT IBM, 1/3 of our projects are applied projects. So this is that the company, there's a task that they want to improve the production of. So that's about 30% of the work of the lab will go for this. And we also have a membership with MIT IBM, so other company can approach us to develop solution at a short term. On the other side of this dimension, well, we are academic. We are very, very good with innovation, with coming up with new idea that we implement into an algorithm, a model, result, simulation. So I think that the company out there want to have a view, they want to see what's going on, this full menu, for instance, when they are with us and ILP at MIT. So you want to see that because you have a sight onto the possible future, you know what you're looking for in your business, and you can decide to follow up. Oh, this idea might give us something in 2 or 5 years, and this is very, very true for material development, sustainability, biodiversity. And then in the middle, you have what we call use-inspire projects. So those are still innovation, but the way they are structured or the question asked, you see a path towards an application or product or a solution. For instance, those days, a lot of work in computer vision due to the generative model that can really do new videos and segment object. A lot of research in computer vision has a direct impact onto a product or an application that are use-inspired. So the ideal will be those three.
Maybe to catch up on another question, the access to this AI, which is so powerful and so promising as a game changer for the industry, requires a lot of means from within the company. So does it not create a competitive disadvantage, skewing towards big corporates rather than smaller companies that could not be able to just leverage that? So maybe Sarah first, and then Aude, what's your view on that? Is there a competitive disadvantage regarding AI towards corporates?
So I think it also depends on who is actually bringing the AI. So I have the perspective of working creating a startup that is an external provider for industry leaders, and I think we have a real role to play into bringing those technologies smoothly into the corporate world, into the industry world. Of course, this is something that we work on hand in hand with corporates when it comes to choosing the right projects to get started with, really understanding what is the main value that they can get from the platform that we developed, like what kind of data they have, because there's also this question about data availability and data accessibility. So I think both the providers and the corporates need to invest some time, but we have this mission to make sure that integration is smooth for corporates and that we mostly bring all the value straight away to our customers instead of having them spending a lot of time into trying to understand what we do. We need to really explain how AI works and how AI can be integrated into the workflows, but corporates need to be open to integrate such solutions into their companies.
Okay, Aude, maybe, do you see differences between?
Yeah, well, so for us, AI model are species. So at the extreme, in Google, Amazon, OpenAI, and so on, you have those 500 billion parameters. But now, you can also work very well with a 3 billion parameters model that will be tuned to the data of your enterprise, which will work on a laptop. because those platforms, as I do know more, of course, about IBM because I'm more involved, they are actually implementing those models to run very, very fast with some optimization that were actually developed at MIT, and they make their way into the model you can download or can be applied to your business. So you can really go a long way with 3 billion parameters model that will learn more from your data. And that is available to everyone.
Yeah, Stéphane, you want
if I may, I think big corporations have more problems than smaller organizations. In fact, there's a competitive advantage to be small. George rightly said that it's hugely complicated to drive change in a 90,000 people organization. And to be honest, a smaller organization, they go fast, they adapt, they are focused on one problem and not on 10,000. At the end of the day, when you have a good idea, you find money, yeah? Probably easier than in a big corporation, yeah? Maybe Sarah, going to my boss saying, I need 10 million euros to develop this product will be a 6 months governance topic. You might find that in 2 weeks' time going around the world. So I'm not sure that, I think it's probably a massive challenge for a bigger organization. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, let's continue on this front. I like that. We said we would dig into the real world. So staying with you, Stéphane, can you talk to us about the challenges? You mentioned a few examples of how you're using currently AI within Equans to make progress. But what are the main challenges that you are facing when integrating AI in your projects, with examples?
I think we have 3 main problems. The first is budget and affordability. So it's, you can do great things, but does it help? So you shouldn't try to find the problem or you shouldn't try to see a solution and then seek for a problem. You need to start with problems.
Yeah, very well said by George.
And what is important is you need to have a governance for that, because there's also a budget problem. In general terms, the people who face the problem are not the one who holds the budgets to help them solve those problems. So you need to have a kind of bottom-up identifying the problems, because the people who know the problems are the people on the ground. And you need to find a way for those problems to come up to a governance point where you have people who are holding budgets to bring them to solve the problems. So that's the first complicated matter. The second, I believe, is once a person has used personally ChatGPT to do one thing innovative, interesting, you need to put a really robust platform, technological platform. You need to have a very strong IT to support that. So, because if not, AI is also about capturing data. No? So if you don't have data, you don't have AI. And for companies like us, where we have lots of IT systems, lots of silos, lots of things, lots of processes which are still not digitalized, then you don't have data. You have data, but it's on paper, so it's useless for AI. And the third topic is scalability. We are a highly decentralized company, which is great in terms of innovation, because you have lots of people, smart people, dealing every day with the problems. But then you need, at some point in time, when you have identified a game changer, how do you bring it to the next level and you roll it out and disseminate it in your organization? And this is quite complicated too, because you need then a very interesting solution locally. If you want to implement it worldwide or to a larger situation, then you need to make it robust. You need to ensure that it's cyber compliant. You need to ensure that it deals with GDPR. You need to ethics, etc., etc. IP, lots of different topics, and you need to have a robust way of doing it. You need to train people. You need to convince people that this solution is good, maybe they have another solution, but for now we have decided to go for this solution and not for another. So, so with all of this, I think the game changer is skills and awareness. And for once, in our companies, we tend to have massive budgets to train younger people to do their work. And we are at a point in time in history where we need to have massive monies to train our managers. Because people like me, I've been working in this company for 30 years. I left school, university in 1992. I was the first class in my business school who had to have a personal computer, but there was no network, so it was only disk moving back and forth. Internet was not there. So I'm from an older world.
Yeah.
And
training is key.
And the problem is that my peers in the company are all the ones who hold the budgets and are the decision makers. So if those guys don't have a clue about what it's about, then it's difficult to take decisions. So I think we need to invest, and we've started to do so, to train our managers and start with that, because the younger generation, they know how to use ChatGPT. I hardly.
Train the CFOs, that's your first requirement. Okay, Sarah, back to you from your experience regarding the problems that your clients are facing with your systems. What are the main trends that you see?
Yeah. So for me as well, there are like three main important
Everybody
points.
has three. I don't know why. It's always the case.
We tend to summarize, but then there's several ideas within them. So I think the first one is actually identifying the most important projects to get started with. AI cannot be integrated in like any workflow from one day to the other. We need to be really strategic in how the technology or the platform in our context will be integrated into R&D workflows. So usually we spend a lot of time, we spend some time at least with our customers to identify the high value projects which can help them assess and understand quickly the value of our solution to optimize their processes and their workflows. So this is the first point, but of course this also requires to understand what AI can bring, what are the possibilities and what are the limitations. Of course, AI is not magic. We need to make sure that we have a problem that is scoped in a way that is relevant. We need to make sure that we have some data that is available, that the data is great enough to be used by the AI models. And I think there is a lot of understanding to put into all those different kind of components which enable a project to be successful within an organization. Then it's really a step-by-step process. So once we identify a good ROI of the solution, we can extend to either other teams, other projects within companies, and have the AI platform integrated smoothly. So this is the first point to me. Then related to this point, the data problem is also important to mention. Usually when we talk with industry players, we always ask them the same question. Is your data well consolidated? And in 90% of the scenarios, the reason, the answer is that the data is not well consolidated. They can have data spread into different formats, in a little bit in softwares, a little bit in like PDF reports or Excel sheets or whatever they can think about, and they can share many different kind of formats with us. And I think this data accessibility problem is really important to integrate smoothly AI into organizations. So we spend some time with our customers, providing them some services to help them consolidate all this data into a single source of truth, into a format that can be directly ingested into the AI models and the platform so that they can then leverage all this data. And I think it's crucial for them to integrate and use this data in a way that is efficient, because data is a lot of knowledge. If I take the example of R&D, like all the chemical knowledge within the industry relies on the experiments which have been done before by other chemists. And we have seen that some R&D labs sometimes fail to reproduce some past experiments done by other chemists because they lost this information.
Yeah, they forgot.
Yeah, so it's definitely crucial to make sure that a single source of truth is built by aggregating all this data, and therefore we have also this mission to help corporates with that point. And finally, I will say that, of course, change management is a real
like
thing.
that.
We are happy to see that industry players are more and more open to integrate AI into their workflows. They see that there is something that they need to do. They see that they need to modernize their workflows and adopt these technologies quickly. Of course, they need some support and some help to make sure that this is done in a way that is relevant. And change management can take time. There was this question before about whether integration of AI should come from technical people or business people. I think it actually comes from both. In our company, we actually work with technical people because they are the final users, but to be able to integrate smoothly AI into their workflows, they also need to understand the business impact and have the business people working well and efficiently with the technical people, to make sure that AI can bring the most value.
Thank you very much. Very clear. Aude, do you have your 3 points to add, or do you have another version of your answer to that?
I think there's some question waiting.
Okay, then go for it.
From the public. Oh, I cannot read them. I just see.
Okay, I will direct it to you. This one I think is very important and at the top of the list. How AI can be compatible with climate change? So, what is your view, Aude, regarding its environmental impacts and data centers, explosion of data?
Well, the explosion of data center that some of the largest company wants to build, I'm hearing hundred of trillion of dollars going on, are incompatible with climate change. Okay, that's clear.
So no more AI?
No, because there's a lot, so that is going to put really a lot of effort on the grid, the need for electricity, and so on. So new solution needs to be found there. However, there's actually, AI is really it's a species. You have a lot of different algorithms, and coming up from innovation anywhere in the world, and particularly with some startup at MIT, are coming up with new algorithms that are 95% less energy hungry when it comes to train or test. So that is the future, that the larger company, they are going to come to that. And in that case, now
okay, Stéphane, maybe you want to piggyback on this one?
Yeah, definitely. I think a driver will be what is the footprint of the algorithm. And I think this will be a game changer looking forward. There's lots to be done in the physical infrastructure, though. I mean, we will need data centers. For now, it's fair to say that data centers is a huge, means huge consumption of electricity and then heat blown into the air. So it's absolutely not optimized. So the next generation of data centers will need to reuse waste heat, and this can be done. This can be technically done in district heating, in etc. For now, the business case is complicated because it's costly. But when we move to artificial intelligence, which also move to liquid cooling, liquid cooling will mean higher temperature, which makes the business model better fly. Anyway, there won't be any, there's no other solution because there won't be any permits anymore. So we already see in Europe really constraints on the permitting, environmental permitting. So I believe we need to work alongside the chip manufacturers, alongside the equipment provider, alongside the data center operators to find, at least to try to reduce to the maximum possible the impact, and there are ways to do so.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have a lot of questions that we won't, unfortunately, have time to answer. Let's, I don't think that any of you want to, well, maybe some of you want to react, sorry, on how the law is catching up with generative AI. Maybe Sarah, you're probably faced with this issue?
Yeah, definitely. This is a really interesting question, like related to how IP is generated or how IP is maintained using generative AI. So actually the laws today are a little bit blurry because AI is kind of a new concept for the law in general. We always explain to industry players how results are generated, to explain how the law is catching up with mastering the IP or distributing the IP. So in general, what is explained by the law, the actual law, is that all the results which are generated by AI models do not confer any IP. And that totally makes sense, because it's just like kind of a robot that is generating those results, even if there is some knowledge behind that was put to build the model or integrate the data or whatever. At the end, the results generated by ChatGPT or any kind of system do not relate to the actual author rights, the concept of author rights as defined today by the international laws. So today, it's pretty clear in terms of the distribution of the IP, like the people providing the AI models or building the AI models actually own the IP on the AI models, but then the results do not confer any IP to anyone, and they need to be used for some specific application and transformed so that they can directly generate some IP. But of course, we need to be careful with the
evolution of the law.
Evolve over time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So time is almost up, and it's finally time for me to wrap up. And what best way to do so than by asking you, all of you, this very simple question. And I will start with you, AUDE, because we have withheld this answer for so many minutes now. So, AI for industry, hype or revolution?
At the moment,
one word, huh?
It's going to be at the moment 1/3 hype, 1/3 revolution, 2/3 hype.
Thank you, Sarah.
There is some hype, but it's actually a revolution.
And Stéphane?
I believe it will become a revolution.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. And I'm turning to Olivier for the closing statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah, AUDE, Stéphane, Marcus, George. It was a tremendous morning, and I think we have part of the response now, Olivier, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed the diversity of the talks and the clarity of the answers in the last panel as well. One thing for me is really clear is that indeed AI poses a number of challenges, and we've heard some of them this morning. But all these challenges will be solved by humans. They won't be solved by AI. So AI is really a challenge that humans can solve and have to solve.
Yeah. And I will add something, because on the roundtable we had the question about the climate. And you were together in Boston 2 weeks ago with Marilus and Vince, and you show us CFS, Commonwealth Fusion System, a company that will be able to produce, let's say, green, totally green energy in a huge volume, let's say, and shortly, 2030, the fusion nuclear, the fusion in 2030, it was incredible. So for sure, you are ready to push techniques and greener solution for the future.
That's right, and that sounds like an interesting theme, maybe for a symposium in the coming years.
Yeah, for sure.
Why not?
Maybe next year.
Yeah.
So thank you again, MIT guys, to be with us today. It was, as usual, let's say, fantastic. And let's now go to the networking session on the lobby, and maybe next year.
I look forward to that. Thank you, Christophe. Thank you, Bouygues. Thank you.